Word of the Liberty's victories reached every corner of the galaxy within days. On countless worlds, beings who had lived under the threat of Krek's aggression began to whisper about the humans who had appeared from nowhere to challenge the Empire. In slave pens and mining colonies, workers who had given up hope started to believe that freedom might be possible. The Krek's empire, meanwhile, was in chaos. Emperor Kraxus had ordered the mobilization of 3 entire fleets to hunt down and destroy the Liberty, but his military commanders were reluctant to engage. The survivors of the 4th Fleet had spread terrifying accounts of human weapons that could erase ships from existence. Morale throughout the Krek's military was at an all-time low. "Find me someone who can destroy this human ship," Kraxus roared at his assembled generals in the Imperial War Room. The massive chamber was filled with tactical displays showing Krek's territories throughout the galaxy, many now marked with warning symbols indicating human activity. General Thyrak, the most experienced military leader in the Empire, stepped forward reluctantly. His scarred hide bore the marks of 100 battles, but even he seemed shaken by the reports from Zephyr system. "My Emperor, our conventional weapons appear to be useless against human defenses," Thyrak reported. "Perhaps we should consider negotiation instead of military action." The suggestion earned Thyrak a swift, backhanded blow from the Emperor's massive claws. The general stumbled backward, purple blood flowing from cuts on his face, but he did not fall. He had survived worse from Kraxus before. "Negotiation is weakness," Kraxus snarled. "The Krek's empire does not bow to inferior species. Find me a way to kill these humans, or I will find someone who can." Unknown to the Krek's leadership, their communications were being intercepted by human intelligence satellites hidden throughout their territory. Earth's spy network had been in place for years, gathering information about potential threats and hostile activities. Every word spoken in the Imperial War Room was transmitted instantly to Earth Command. Admiral Sarah Williams reviewed the intercepted conversations in her office beneath the Pentagon. The Kreks were planning something desperate, possibly involving their most dangerous weapons. She picked up her secure phone and placed a call to the Liberty. "Captain Hayes, this is Earth Command. We're detecting significant Krek's fleet movements toward your position. Intelligence suggests they may be planning to use their planet-killer weapons." Rick received the transmission while the Liberty was approaching the Kepler system, where Krek's forces had enslaved the population of 4 mining worlds. The planet-killer weapons were something Earth scientists had theorized about but never confirmed. If the Kreks were willing to use them, the situation was more serious than anyone had imagined. "Understood, Admiral. How many ships are we talking about?" "Long-range sensors show at least 500 vessels converging on your location. 3 full battle fleets plus support ships. ETA is approximately 8 hours. 500 ships." It was more than double the force that the Liberty had faced at Zephyr, and this time the enemy would be prepared for human weapons. Rick looked around the bridge at his crew, noting their calm professionalism despite the overwhelming odds. "Amy, contact the colonies in the Kepler system," Rick ordered. "Tell them to begin immediate evacuation procedures. If the Kreks are bringing planet killers, nowhere on those worlds will be safe." The evacuation began immediately, but 4 worlds containing millions of people could not be emptied in 8 hours. The best they could hope for was to get the most vulnerable populations to safety before the battle began. As the hours passed, more details about the approaching Krek's force became available through intercepted communications. The 3 fleets were led by the most experienced admirals in the Empire, warriors who had conquered entire star systems. They had been given orders to destroy the Liberty at any cost, even if it meant sacrificing their own ships in the process. Most concerning was the presence of the dreadnought Worldbreaker, a massive vessel equipped with weapons capable of cracking planets apart. The ship was over 10 miles long and carried enough firepower to sterilize entire solar systems. It had been used only twice in Krek's history, both times to make examples of species that had dared to resist Imperial rule. "Sir, long-range sensors are detecting the incoming fleet," reported Lisa from her tactical station. "They're dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system." The tactical display lit up with red contacts as the Krek's armada emerged from faster-than-light travel. 500 ships arranged in a massive formation that stretched across millions of miles of space. At the center of the formation sat the Worldbreaker, its dark hull bristling with weapons that could end civilizations. Rick studied the enemy deployment with professional interest. The Kreks had learned from their previous encounters with the Liberty. Instead of clustering their ships together, they had spread them out in a wide formation that would be harder to destroy with single shots. They had also positioned their fastest ships to surround the Liberty, preventing it from escaping if the battle turned against them. "They're trying to box us in," Jake observed from the weapon station. "Smart tactical thinking, but they still don't understand what they're dealing with." The Kreks fleet began advancing in perfect formation, maintaining spacing that would allow each ship to bring its weapons to bear while avoiding friendly fire incidents. It was an impressive display of military coordination that spoke to the Empire's centuries of combat experience. But the Liberty was not just another battleship. The massive human vessel carried weapons and technologies that the Kreks could not comprehend. Hidden in its armored hull were systems that could manipulate the fundamental forces of the universe, devices that treated the laws of physics as suggestions rather than absolutes. "Bobby, bring all systems to full power," Rick ordered. "We're going to need everything the ship can give us." In the engineering section, Chief Engineer Bobby Chen's hands flew over his control panels as he activated systems that had never been used in actual combat. The Liberty's experimental weapons drew power directly from the quantum vacuum, tapping into the infinite energy that existed in empty space itself. "All systems online and ready, Captain," Bobby reported. "Reactor output is at 120% of normal operation. We're pushing the boundaries of what's theoretically possible." The Kreks fleet reached weapons range and opened fire simultaneously. 500 ships unleashed their arsenals in a coordinated barrage that lit up space with destructive energy. Plasma bolts, particle beams, fusion missiles, and kinetic projectiles filled the void between the two forces. The Liberty's shields flared brilliantly as they absorbed and redirected the incoming fire. For several minutes, the human battleship disappeared behind a sphere of pure energy as its defensive systems worked to handle the massive assault. When the light finally faded, the Liberty emerged completely unharmed. "No damage reported," Bobby announced with satisfaction. "Shields are down to 60%, but all systems remain fully operational." The Kreks had thrown everything they had at the Liberty and accomplished nothing more than dimming its shields. But this time they were prepared for that result. Admiral Zorthak, commanding the lead fleet from his flagship Vengeance, had expected the human defenses to hold. "Phase 2, Zorthak commanded. "Deploy the reality bombs." The Kreks had brought their most exotic weapons to this battle, devices that could disrupt the fundamental forces that held matter together. Reality bombs were weapons of last resort, so dangerous that using them risked damaging the fabric of space-time itself. But the Liberty was ready for them. Hidden among the ship's defensive systems were countermeasures that Earth scientists had developed specifically to deal with exotic weapon attacks. When the reality bombs detonated, their destructive force was absorbed and redirected into parallel dimensions. Rick smiled grimly as he watched the Kreks weapons fail one after another. The aliens were discovering that human technology was not just advanced, it was revolutionary. Earth's scientists had learned to think in ways that other species could not imagine. "Our turn," Rick said quietly. "Show them what happens when you threaten innocent people." The Liberty's response was swift and devastating. Instead of targeting individual ships, Rick ordered the activation of the vessel's most powerful weapon system. Deep in the battleship's core, a device that had been theoretical until recently came online for the first time in actual combat. The Cascade Generator was humanity's answer to overwhelming numerical odds. It created a chain reaction in space-time itself, allowing a single shot to propagate through multiple targets simultaneously. When Jake pressed the firing control, a beam of twisted space erupted from the Liberty's main gun. The beam struck the first Krek ship, and instead of stopping, it jumped to the nearest vessel like a bolt of lightning seeking the ground. From there, it leaped to another ship and another, each jump becoming more powerful as it fed on the destroyed matter. Within seconds, dozens of Krek's vessels were being consumed by the cascading destruction. Admiral Zorthak watched in horror as his carefully planned formation was torn apart by a weapon that seemed to defy every law of physics he understood. Ships were vanishing in chains of destruction that spread through his fleet like a plague. The neat battle lines that had taken hours to arrange dissolved into chaos as captains tried desperately to escape the cascading death. "All ships scatter," Zorthak ordered, but it was too late. The cascade had taken on a life of its own, jumping from ship to ship faster than the Krek's crews could react. In less than 5 minutes, over 100 vessels had been erased from existence. But the Liberty wasn't finished. As the remaining Krek ships fled in panic, the human battleship activated its secondary weapon systems. Swarms of hunter-killer drones poured from launch bays hidden throughout the ship's hull. Each drone was no larger than a fighter craft, but they carried miniaturized versions of the Liberty's dark matter weapons. The drones spread out through the battlefield like a school of predatory fish, seeking targets among the fleeing Krek ships. They moved with inhuman precision, their artificial intelligence allowing them to coordinate attacks that no biological pilot could achieve. Within minutes, another 50 enemy vessels had been destroyed by the hunter swarms. The dreadnought World Breaker, the pride of the Krek's fleet, found itself alone as smaller ships fled around it. The massive vessel's captain, Admiral Vex, had served the Empire for over 2 centuries. He had never retreated from a battle and was not about to start now. "All weapons, target the human ship," Vex commanded. "If we're going to die, we'll take them with us." The Worldbreaker's planet-killing weapons charged to full power, drawing energy from reactors that could power entire star systems. The massive vessel's hull glowed with barely contained energy as its most destructive weapons prepared to fire. But Captain Hayes had been waiting for this moment. The Liberty's sensors had been tracking the dreadnought's power buildup, and the ship's tactical computer had calculated the optimal response. As the Worldbreaker's weapons reached full charge, the Liberty struck first. A focused beam of dark matter energy lanced across space, but instead of targeting the enemy ship's hull, it aimed for the Worldbreaker's main reactor. The beam penetrated the dreadnought's armor like it was made of paper, reaching deep into the ship's core where its power systems were located. The result was spectacular. The Worldbreaker's reactor containment failed catastrophically, releasing the energy of a small star in an uncontrolled explosion. The massive ship tore itself apart from within, its hull plates flying in all directions as the accumulated power of its weapon systems fed the destruction. The explosion was visible from the surface of all 4 planets in the Kepler system. A new star appeared briefly in the sky as the pride of the Krek's fleet consumed itself in nuclear fire. When the light faded, nothing remained but scattered debris and rapidly expanding gases. The surviving Krek ships fled the system in complete disorder, their formation broken and their morale shattered. Of the 500 vessels that had arrived to destroy the Liberty, fewer than 100 escaped. The others had been erased by weapons that the Kreks could not understand or defend against. Rick stood on the Liberty's bridge, watching the last enemy contacts disappear into hyperspace. The battle had lasted less than an hour, but its consequences would echo throughout the galaxy for years to come. The Krek's Empire's military power had been broken in a single engagement. "Casualty report," Rick requested. "0 casualties on our side," reported Dr. Helen Martinez from the medical bay. "Minor shield damage that's already being repaired. The Liberty is fully operational and ready for the next mission." Amy's communication console lit up with incoming messages from across the galaxy. News of the battle was spreading faster than light itself, carried by quantum communication networks that reached every civilized world. The reports all carried the same message. Humanity had emerged as the galaxy's dominant military power. The Krek's homeworld, Emperor Kraxus, received the devastating news in stunned silence. 3 entire fleets destroyed, the Worldbreaker gone, and his empire's reputation in ruins. For the first time in his long reign, he faced the possibility of complete defeat. "Contact the humans," Kraxus ordered his advisors, the words tasting like poison in his mouth. "Arrange a meeting to discuss terms." The message reached Earth within hours, transmitted through diplomatic channels that the Kreks had never used before. Emperor Kraxus, terror of the galaxy, was requesting negotiations for the first time in his 300-year reign. President Helen Parker read the message with satisfaction. The Kreks had finally learned that humanity would not tolerate aggression against innocent populations. But the job was far from finished. There were other predatory species in the galaxy, other empires that preyed on the weak. Send a message to all galactic powers, Helen ordered her advisors. Make it clear that Earth stands ready to defend any peaceful species against aggression. The age of might making right is over. The message went out across thousands of star systems, reaching species that had lived in fear for centuries. On worlds where slavery had been accepted as inevitable, people began to hope for freedom. In systems controlled by tyrants, oppressed, populations started to believe that change was possible. The Liberty continued its patrol of the Outer Rim, but now it was no longer alone. Other human battleships emerged from the hidden shipyards where they had been constructed in secret. The Washington, the Lincoln, the Roosevelt, and 8 others joined the Liberty in its mission to bring peace to the galaxy. Captain Hayes stood in the observation lounge of the Liberty, watching the stars wheel by as his ship jumped to its next destination. Behind them lay a trail of liberated worlds and defeated tyrants. Ahead waited new challenges and new opportunities to demonstrate that humanity's strength came not from cruelty or greed, but from an unwavering commitment to justice. The galaxy had trembled when Earth's battleships arrived, but not from fear of conquest or domination. They trembled because they finally understood that the universe had gained protectors who would fight for those who could not fight for themselves. The age of human guardianship had begun, and nothing would ever be the same. In systems across the galaxy, enslaved populations looked up at the stars with new hope. Children who had known only oppression began to dream of freedom. And somewhere in the darkness between the stars, other predatory species reconsidered their plans for conquest, knowing that humanity was watching and would not hesitate to act. The message was clear to any who would listen. The weak were no longer defenseless, the innocent were no longer alone, and those who preyed on others would face the combined might of Earth's fleet. The galaxy had a new sheriff, and justice had finally come to the stars. The Liberty unleashed its full arsenal against the advancing Krek ships. Dark matter cannons fired in sequence, each beam reaching across space to delete another enemy vessel from existence. Railguns spat hypervelocity projectiles that tore through multiple targets with each shot. Missile launchers released swarms of smart munitions that curved through space like hunting predators seeking their prey. The battle, if it could even be called that, lasted less than 10 minutes. The 70 Krek ships that had chosen to continue fighting were systematically destroyed by weapons they couldn't understand or defend against. Each human shot found its target with perfect accuracy, guided by targeting computers that could predict enemy movements seconds before they happened. Commander Lisa Clark watched the tactical display with professional satisfaction as red contacts disappeared one by one. The Liberty's artificial intelligence was learning from each engagement, becoming more efficient with every shot fired. What had started as a demonstration of superior firepower was evolving into a masterclass in military precision. Enemy fleet neutralized, Lisa reported as the last attacking ship broke apart under fire from the railguns. All hostile contacts have been eliminated or are retreating. The surviving Krek ships fled toward the edge of the system, their engines glowing white-hot as they pushed their reactors beyond safe limits. Behind them, they left a debris field that had once been the pride of their empire. The Fourth Fleet, terror of the Outer Rim, had been destroyed by a single human vessel in less than half an hour. Rick stood quietly on the bridge, watching the retreating ships disappear into hyperspace. He felt no joy in the destruction, only a grim satisfaction that the threat had been eliminated. The Kreks had chosen their path when they decided to prey on innocent civilians. "Amy, contact the colonies," Rick ordered. "Let them know the blockade has been broken." The communications officer established links with the 3 colony worlds. The responses came back immediately, voices filled with disbelief and overwhelming gratitude. For days, the colonists had expected death or slavery. Now suddenly they were free. "Captain Hayes, this is Governor Martinez on Zephyr Prime. came one transmission. "We can't believe what we're seeing on our sensors. The Krex fleet is gone." "How is that possible?" "The Krex chose to threaten innocent people," Rick replied simply. "Earth doesn't tolerate that kind of behavior." As news of the Liberty's victory spread through the colonies, celebrations began on all three worlds. People poured into the streets, cheering and crying with relief. Children who had hidden in shelters for days finally emerged to see sunlight again. The nightmare was over, but the implications of what had happened reached far beyond the Zephyr system. The surviving Krex ships carried with them testimony of humanity's overwhelming military superiority. Word would spread through the galaxy that Earth possessed weapons beyond anything previously imagined. On the Krex homeworld of Vorthak Prime, Emperor Kraxus received the devastating news in his palace throne room. The massive alien ruler, whose empire spanned 50 star systems, listened in growing horror as the survivors described the battle. "Impossible," Kraxus roared, his forearms slamming against the armrests of his throne. "No single ship could destroy the Fourth Fleet. The survivors are lying to cover their cowardice." But as more reports came in, the truth became undeniable. The humans had weapons that could erase matter from existence. Their ships were protected by defenses that made them virtually invulnerable. The species that the Krex had dismissed as primitive mammals had revealed themselves as apex predators. For the first time in his 300-year reign, Emperor Kraxus felt something he had not experienced since childhood. Fear, the Galactic. Council convened an emergency session within hours of receiving reports about the battle. Representatives from dozens of species gathered in the Great Hall on the neutral world of Centauri Station, their voices echoing with concern and amazement. "The destruction of the Krex Fourth Fleet changes everything," declared Councillor Zethor of the Altarian Republic. His blue skin was pale with worry as he addressed the assembled delegates. "These humans possess weapons beyond our understanding." The council chamber buzzed with nervous conversation. Some delegates called for immediate negotiations with Earth, hoping to secure peaceful relations with this new superpower. Others suggested forming a defensive alliance against what they saw as a potential threat to galactic stability. "The humans have shown no aggression toward peaceful species," pointed out Ambassador Kiln of the Vegan Trade Federation. "They only acted to protect innocent civilians from Krex aggression." "For now," countered Senator Vrex of the Mordani Empire. "But what happens when human interests conflict with our own? Who could stand against weapons that can delete matter itself?" The debate continued for hours, but all agreed on one fundamental point. Humanity could no longer be ignored or dismissed. The species that had quietly developed in their small corner of space had emerged as a force capable of reshaping the galactic balance of power. On Earth, President Helen Parker received reports of the Liberty's success in her office in the White House. She sat behind her desk, reading the tactical analysis with the calm expression that had served her well during 20 years in politics. Around her, military advisors and cabinet members waited for her response. "Casualties?" she asked quietly. "None on our side," reported General David Stone, chairman of the Joint Chiefs. "The Liberty took no damage and suffered no injuries. As for the Krex, we estimate 4,000 dead and approximately 8,000 survivors who retreated." Helen nodded. The numbers were sobering, but the Krex had made their choice when they attacked defenseless colonies. Earth's rules of engagement were clear. Protect the innocent, defend the weak, and show no mercy to those who preyed on others. "How are the other galactic powers responding?" she asked. Secretary of State Karen Walsh stepped forward with a tablet displaying diplomatic reports. "Mixed reactions, Madam President. Some species are requesting immediate diplomatic contact. Others are calling for sanctions or defensive alliances against us. The Galactic Council is in emergency session." "And the Krex?" No official response. Yet, but intelligence suggests they're mobilizing additional fleets. Emperor Kraxus may be planning a larger assault to restore their reputation. Helen smiled grimly. The Krex were welcome to try. Earth had been preparing for this moment for decades, building weapons and ships in secret while the galaxy dismissed humanity as harmless newcomers. The Liberty was just the first of 12 identical battleships, each one capable of single-handedly destroying entire enemy fleets. Send a message to all galactic powers, Helen decided. Make it clear that Earth has no territorial ambitions and seeks peaceful relations with all species. But also make it clear that we will defend innocent populations against aggression, regardless of the source. The message went out across the galaxy within hours, transmitted by quantum communication networks that reached every inhabited system. Humanity's position was now clear to all who would listen. Earth had revealed its strength not through conquest or intimidation, but through the protection of those who could not protect themselves. The Liberty continued its patrol of the outer rim, moving from system to system where Krek's forces had established footholds. Each encounter followed the same pattern. The human battleship would arrive, demand the withdrawal of hostile forces, and destroy any who refused to comply. News of each victory spread quickly through interstellar communication networks. Enslaved populations began to hope for liberation. Peaceful species started to believe that the age of might making right might finally be ending. And predatory empires like the Kreks began to understand that their days of unopposed aggression were over. The galaxy was witnessing the emergence of a new power, one that fought not for conquest or resources, but for the simple principle that the strong should protect the weak. It was a concept that many alien species found difficult to understand, but they were learning to respect it nonetheless. Captain Rick Hayes stood on the observation deck of the Liberty, watching the stars wheel by as his ship jumped to its next destination. Behind them lay a trail of liberated worlds and defeated tyrants. Ahead waited new challenges and new opportunities to demonstrate that humanity's strength came not from cruelty or greed, but from an unwavering commitment to justice. News of the Liberty's approach spread through the galaxy faster than light itself. On the bridge of the Krek's flagship destroyer of worlds, Admiral Vorthak received the intelligence report with amusement. His 3 yellow eyes gleamed with cruel humor as he read the data streaming across his command screen. A single human ship dares to challenge the might of the Krek's empire? Vorthak laughed, his voice echoing through the bridge. His officers joined in the laughter, their sharp teeth clicking together in what passed for Krek's humor. These mammals must have lost their minds. The Kreks had conquered dozens of star systems over the past century. Their fleet numbered in the thousands, each ship battle-tested and proven in combat. They had crushed the military forces of 12 different species, enslaved billions of beings, and stripped entire worlds of their resources. What could one ship do against such overwhelming power? Vorthak had heard rumors about human military technology, whispered stories from survivors of previous encounters, but he dismissed them as propaganda and fear-mongering. The humans were newcomers to the galactic stage, barely 300 years since they had discovered faster-than-light travel. How could such a young species pose any real threat to the ancient Krek's empire? Deploy the entire 4th Fleet, Vorthak commanded, his clawed hands gripping the armrests of his command chair. I want this human ship destroyed as an example to the rest of the galaxy. Let every species know what happens when they interfere with Krek's operations. 200 Krek's warships began moving to intercept the Liberty. Each vessel was heavily armed and armored, designed for the brutal combat that the Kreks preferred. Their ships were built like hammers, meant to batter enemy forces into submission through sheer firepower and overwhelming numbers. The 4th Fleet had never been defeated in battle. They had destroyed the combined navies of 3 star systems in a single engagement just 2 years ago. The fleet's reputation for brutality and efficiency was known throughout the galaxy. Entire civilizations had surrendered rather than face them in combat. As the Krek ships formed up for battle, their crews prepared for what they expected to be an easy victory. Weapon systems came online, targeting computers calculated firing solutions, and boarding parties prepared to capture any survivors for interrogation and eventual slavery. Captain Hayes watched the enemy fleet approach on his tactical display. The red dots representing Krek ships formed a massive cloud on the screen, each one representing hundreds of alien warriors eager for battle. His weapons officer, Commander Jake Murphy, looked nervous as he counted the hostile contacts. "Sir, we're outnumbered 200 to 1, Jake reported, his voice steady despite the overwhelming odds. "Should we call for backup? The Lincoln and the Washington could be here in 6 hours. Rick shook his head. The Lincoln and Washington were Earth's other battleships, equally powerful but currently defending human colonies on the far side of the galaxy. The Liberty is all the backup we need. Besides, those colonies down there don't have 6 hours. Prepare our main guns for combat. What the Kreks didn't understand was that humans approached warfare differently than any other species in the galaxy. While aliens focused on quantity and traditional tactics, humans had spent centuries perfecting the art of destruction. Every weapon on the Liberty was designed with one purpose in mind: to end fights quickly and decisively. The Liberty's tactical computer began analyzing the enemy formation, identifying weak points and calculating optimal firing patterns. The ship's artificial intelligence, nicknamed Alice by the crew, processed millions of variables in seconds, creating a battle plan that would maximize damage while minimizing risk to the Liberty. "Sir, Alice has identified the optimal attack pattern," reported Lisa Clark from her tactical station. "She recommends we target their command structure first, then work our way through their heavy units." Rick nodded. It was a sound strategy, one that played to the Liberty's strengths. The human battleship was designed to fight outnumbered, using superior technology and tactics to overcome numerical disadvantages. The first Krek ships opened fire from long range, their plasma cannons lighting up space with bolts of superheated energy. The attacks looked impressive, streaks of blue and red energy that could melt through conventional armor like paper. But they splashed harmlessly against the Liberty's shields, which flickered but held firm. The Liberty's defensive systems were based on principles that the Kreks had never encountered. Instead of simply absorbing energy attacks, the shields redirected them into parallel dimensions, dispersing the destructive force across multiple realities. It was technology that bordered on magic, developed by human scientists who had learned to think outside the conventional rules of physics. "Shields holding at 98%, reported Chief Engineer Bobby Chen from the engineering deck. "The Kreks' weapons aren't even scratching our paint, sir." Vorthak watched in growing confusion as his ship's weapons failed to penetrate the human vessel's defenses. The plasma cannons that had shattered the hulls of countless enemy ships were having no effect whatsoever. It was impossible. No shield technology in the galaxy was that effective. "Increase power to all weapons," Vorthak snarled. "Focus all fire on a single point. We'll overwhelm their defenses through concentrated firepower." 50 Krek ships adjusted their aim, targeting the same section of the Liberty's hull. Their combined firepower could have reduced a small moon to ash, but the human battleship continued to advance without slowing. The concentrated attack had no more effect than the scattered shots before it. "Admiral, our weapons appear to be ineffective," reported one of Vorthak's subordinates, his voice trembling with fear. "The human ship shows no signs of damage." Vorthak's 3 eyes narrowed dangerously. In all his years of conquest, he had never encountered shields that could withstand such firepower. The humans had technology that defied everything the Kreksi thought they knew about warfare. "Then we'll board them," Vorthak decided. "Launch the assault pods. Even if we can't penetrate their hull from outside, we can cut our way in and take the ship from within." Hundreds of small craft launched from the Kreks fleet, each one carrying a dozen heavily armed warriors. The assault pods were designed to latch onto enemy hulls and burn through armor with plasma torches, allowing boarding parties to fight their way into hostile ships. But as the pods approached the Liberty, something strange happened. They began to slow down, as if moving through thick liquid instead of empty space. The closer they got to the human battleship, the more their engines struggled against an invisible force. "Sir, the Kreks boarding pods are being caught in our gravity well generators," reported Lisa with satisfaction. "They can't get within 1,000 meters of our hull." The Liberty's defensive systems included artificial gravity fields that could be projected away from the ship, creating areas of intense gravitational distortion. The Kreks assault pods found themselves trapped like insects in amber, unable to advance or retreat. Rick smiled grimly as he watched the enemy's confusion on the tactical display. The Kreks were discovering that human military technology was decades ahead of anything else in the galaxy, but the real demonstration was about to begin. "Our turn," Rick said calmly. "Jake, show them what human engineering can do." The Liberty's main gun swiveled toward the enemy fleet like the eyes of some ancient predator focusing on its prey. These weren't ordinary energy weapons that fired plasma bolts or particle beams. Human scientists had weaponized dark matter itself, creating cannons that could tear holes in the fabric of space and time. Commander Jake Murphy placed his hand on the firing control, feeling the weight of the moment. Below his fingers lay the power to reshape reality itself. The main guns hummed with barely contained energy, drawing power from reactors that harvested energy from the quantum vacuum. Target locked on the enemy flagship, Jake reported. All weapons ready to fire. Rick nodded once. Fire. When Jake pressed the firing button, reality itself seemed to scream in protest. A beam of pure darkness lanced out from the Liberty, moving faster than light itself. The beam wasn't made of matter or energy in any conventional sense. It was an absence, a void that devoured everything it touched. The beam struck the lead Krex ship, Admiral Vorthak's personal flagship. The massive vessel didn't explode or burn or break apart. It simply ceased to exist, erased from the universe as if it had never been built. One moment the ship was there, bristling with weapons and armor. The next moment there was only empty space. The beam continued through space, deleting 2 more ships before dissipating into the cosmic background. 3 of the Krex Empire's most powerful warships had been removed from existence in the span of a heartbeat. The Krex fleet stopped their advance. On dozens of bridges throughout the enemy formation, alien commanders stared in shock at the empty space where their flagship had been. Their sensors showed nothing, not even debris. The ships and their crews of over 5,000 warriors each had simply vanished. Admiral Vorthak, please respond, came frantic calls over the Krex communication networks. But there was no response because there was no longer an Admiral Vorthak to respond. He and his entire command staff had been erased along with their ship. The remaining Krex ships began to mill about in confusion. Without their flagship to coordinate the attack, the fleet command structure collapsed. Individual ship captains tried to take control, but the Krex military doctrine had always relied on centralized command. They were not prepared for independent action. But the Liberty was just getting started. The battleship's secondary weapons came online, revealing another aspect of human military innovation. While other species used energy weapons that could be deflected by shields, humans had perfected kinetic weapons that moved at impossible speeds. The Liberty's railguns fired projectiles no larger than coins, but accelerated them to 90% of light speed using magnetic fields that could level mountains. Each shot carried the kinetic energy of a small nuclear weapon, capable of punching through multiple starship hulls without slowing down. Jake targeted the heavy cruisers first, the backbone of the Krex formation. The railgun projectiles moved, too fast for the alien targeting systems to track. By the time the Krex sensors detected the incoming fire, the projectiles had already arrived. The first heavy cruiser took a direct hit amidships. The hypervelocity projectile punched through its armor like it was made of paper, tearing through deck after deck before exiting out the other side. The ship's hull cracked along its entire length, atmosphere venting into space as the crew struggled to contain the damage. But the projectile didn't stop there. It continued through space, striking a second ship and then a third. Each impact caused devastating damage, gutting the alien vessels from bow to stern. Within seconds, 6 Krex ships were either destroyed or crippled beyond repair. The surviving Krex commanders finally began to understand what they were facing. The humans didn't just have superior technology. They had weapons that operated on principles the Krex couldn't comprehend. This wasn't a battle between equals. It was a demonstration of superiority by a species that had mastered forces beyond alien understanding. All ships concentrate fire on the human vessel, ordered Captain Zethrak, the highest-ranking Krex officer still alive. Use everything we have. Overload the reactors if necessary. The remaining ships of the Fourth Fleet opened fire with everything in their arsenals. Plasma cannons, particle beams, fusion missiles, and kinetic projectiles filled the space around. The Liberty with destructive energy. The combined firepower of over 150 warships focused on a single target. The attack was impressive by any standard. The energy released was equivalent to several star-going supernova simultaneously. Any other ship in the galaxy would have been instantly vaporized by such concentrated firepower. The Liberty's shields flared as they absorbed and redirected the incoming energy. For a moment, the human battleship was surrounded by a sphere of brilliant light as its defensive systems worked to disperse the attack. But when the light faded, the Liberty remained completely intact. "Damage report," Rick called out, though he already knew the answer. "No damage, sir," reported Bobby Chen from engineering. "Shields are down to 85%, but all systems remain fully operational." The Creks had thrown everything they had at the Liberty and accomplished nothing more than slightly dimming its shields. The technological gap between the two species wasn't just significant, it was overwhelming. Rick stood up from his command chair and walked to the front of the bridge, looking out at the enemy fleet through the main view screen. The Krek ships were scattered and disorganized, their formation broken by the loss of their command structure. Many showed signs of damage from the Liberty's return fire. "Open a channel to the Krek's fleet," Rick ordered. Amy worked her controls, establishing a communication link with the surviving enemy ships. When the channel opened, Rick's voice carried across space to reach every Krek's vessel simultaneously. "Attention, Krek's forces. This is Captain Rick Hayes of the Earth battleship Liberty. You have attacked innocent civilians and enslaved peaceful populations. Your actions end now." Through the communication link, Rick could hear the confusion and fear in the alien voices responding to his message. The Kreks had never encountered a force that could match their military might, let alone exceed it so dramatically. "I'm giving you one chance to withdraw from this system," Rick continued. "Take your ships and leave immediately. Any vessel that remains will be destroyed. You have 60 seconds to begin your retreat." Some of the Krek ships began powering up, their engines preparing to flee. But others, perhaps driven by pride or desperation, moved to attack positions. The Krek's military culture valued strength above all else, and some commanders would rather die fighting than retreat in disgrace. Rick watched the tactical display as the enemy fleet split into two groups. About half the ships were turning to leave, their engines glowing as they prepared to jump to hyperspace. But the other half were moving closer, weapons charging for another attack. "Sir, 80 ships are preparing to retreat, but 70 are moving to engage," Lisa reported from her station. Rick nodded. He had expected this. The Kreks were warriors by nature, and some would choose death over surrender. He respected their courage, even as he prepared to destroy them. "Target the ships that are advancing," Rick ordered. "Spare those that are retreating. Let them carry word of what happened here back to their empire." The Liberty's weapons tracked the advancing Krek ships, targeting systems locking onto each vessel with mechanical precision. The human battleship had demonstrated its power, given the enemy a chance to withdraw, and been answered with continued aggression. Now it was time to finish what the Kreks had started. Captain Rick Hayes stood on the bridge of the battleship Liberty as it dropped out of hyperspace. The massive ship stretched over 2 miles long, bristling with weapons that no other species in the galaxy had ever seen. Around him, his crew worked, at their stations with calm efficiency that came from years of training and preparation. The bridge was quiet except for the soft hum of computers and the gentle vibration of the ship's engines. Rick looked out through the main view screen at the stars ahead. They were still 3 days away from their destination, but already he could feel the weight of what was coming. "Sir, we're receiving multiple distress signals from the Zephyr system," reported Lieutenant Amy Foster at the communications console. Her voice was steady, but Rick could hear the concern underneath. "The Krek's empire has invaded 3 colonies. Civilian casualties are estimated in the millions." Rick's jaw tightened. The Kreks had been terrorizing the Outer Rim for months, enslaving peaceful species and strip mining their worlds. They moved from system to system like a plague, taking what they wanted and leaving nothing but death behind. The Galactic Council had done nothing but file complaints and hold meetings. It was time for Earth to step in. "Show me the tactical display," Rick ordered. The main screen shifted to show a 3-dimensional map of the Zephyr system. Red markers indicated Krek's fleet positions, while blue dots showed the locations of civilian settlements. The enemy had positioned their ships to control all major shipping routes. It was a classic blockade formation designed to starve the colonies into submission. Amy's fingers moved quickly over her console as she gathered more information. Sir, the Kreks have deployed over 50 warships throughout the system. They're demanding that all 3 colonies surrender and submit to immediate harvesting of their populations. Harvesting. Rick had heard that term before in intelligence reports. The Kreks didn't just conquer worlds, they took the people too. Entire populations were shipped off to work as slaves in their mining operations. Those who couldn't work were simply killed. What about the Colonial Defense Forces? Asked Commander Jake Murphy, the ship's weapons officer. Amy shook her head grimly. Destroyed in the initial attack. The colonies have no military vessels left. They're completely defenseless. Rick walked over to the tactical station where Lieutenant Commander Lisa Clark was analyzing the enemy positions. Lisa had been tracking Krek's fleet movements for weeks, learning their patterns and weaknesses. If anyone could find a way to break their blockade, it was her. What do you think, Lisa? Rick asked quietly. Lisa pointed to the tactical display with a stylus. The Kreks are using Standard Formation 7, sir. They've got heavy cruisers controlling the main shipping lanes and destroyers patrolling the outer system. It's effective against conventional forces, but they've left themselves vulnerable to a direct assault. Vulnerable how? Their command ship is positioned in the center of the formation, protected by layers of escorts. They think their numbers make them safe. But if we can punch through their outer defenses quickly enough, we can take out their flagship before they can coordinate a proper response. Rick nodded. It was a bold plan, but then again, the Liberty wasn't a conventional warship. The massive battleship carried weapons and defenses that no alien species had ever encountered. Human military technology had developed along very different lines than the rest of the galaxy. While other species focused on energy shields and plasma weapons, humans had learned to manipulate the fundamental forces of the universe itself. The Liberty's main guns could tear holes in space and time. Its armor was made from materials that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The ship's engines could accelerate it to speeds that technically violated the laws of physics. Set course for Zephyr Prime, Rick ordered. Maximum speed. The Liberty's engines roared to life, pushing the massive battleship forward faster than light itself. The ship's experimental hyperdrive didn't just move through space, it bent reality around the vessel, allowing it to arrive at its destination in hours instead of days. In the depths of the ship, Chief Engineer Bobby Chen monitored the power systems that made such speeds possible. The Liberty's reactors didn't burn fuel in any conventional sense. Instead, they harvested energy directly from the quantum vacuum, tapping into the infinite power that existed between atoms. Engineering to bridge, Bobby's voice came over the intercom. All systems showing green. We'll reach Zephyr in approximately 18 hours at current speed. 18 hours. Rick thought about the millions of people trapped in the Zephyr colonies, waiting for death or slavery. Every minute that passed meant more civilians killed or captured. But the Liberty was still too far away to help them immediately. Amy, open a channel to Earth Command, Rick said. The communications officer worked her controls, establishing a quantum entanglement link with Earth. The connection was instantaneous, bypassing the normal delays of interstellar communication. Earth? Command, this is Liberty Actual. We are en route to Zephyr system to engage Krek's forces. Estimated time of arrival is 18 hours. Admiral Sarah Williams appeared on the screen. She was seated in the war room deep beneath the Pentagon, surrounded by displays showing military operations across human space. Behind her, Rick could see other officers coordinating the movements of Earth's growing fleet. Acknowledged, Liberty. Be advised that long-range sensors are detecting significant Krek's reinforcements moving toward your position. Intelligence estimates. You'll be facing at least 200 enemy vessels, 200 ships. Rick felt his crew tense slightly at the numbers, but he remained calm. The Liberty had been designed specifically for situations like this. One human battleship against an entire enemy fleet. Understood, Admiral. We'll handle it. Sarah Williams smiled grimly. She had known Rick for 10 years, ever since he graduated from the Naval Academy. She had watched him rise through the ranks, earning a reputation as one of Earth's finest tactical minds. If anyone could pull off a victory against impossible odds, it was him. "Good hunting, Captain. Earth is counting on you." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in silence. Rick looked around at his crew, these men and women who had volunteered to carry humanity's message to the stars. They knew what they were heading into. They knew they might not come back. But they also knew that millions of innocent lives depended on their success. "All hands, this is the captain," Rick announced over the ship's intercom. "In 18 hours we will engage a superior enemy force in defense of civilian populations. The Krex Empire believes that might makes right, that the strong can prey upon the weak without consequence. Today we're going to show them how wrong they are." Throughout the Liberty, crew members checked their weapons and equipment one final time. In the hangar bays, fighter pilots ran final diagnostics on their craft. In engineering, technicians ensured that every system was operating at peak efficiency. The battleship raced through hyperspace toward its destiny, carrying with it the hopes and dreams of 3 colonies and the collective fury of humanity itself. The galaxy was about to learn that Earth's children had grown up, and they were not pleased with what they found among the stars. Down in the medical bay, Dr. Helen Martinez prepared for what was coming. She had served on 3 previous missions, where the Liberty had intervened in conflicts. Each time the results had been devastating for the enemy. But she also knew that war always came with casualties, and she would be ready to save every life she could. The Liberty continued its journey through hyperspace, a weapon of unimaginable power racing toward a confrontation that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever.